Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Harley Carnes podcast. I appreciate you being there and being a part of this. It would also be enormously helpful if you would help us reach out and let people know about the show. Maybe they can get something worthwhile out of it, too. Thank you in advance for doing that. I appreciate it. This is a little bit weird, but we have all been there. Ruminations in the dreams of the night that come out of left field, and in this case, out of the distant past. Not from my own life, I'm not that old, but from our own history. You know, we have dreams sometimes. We're sort of running the dream, but we're not. I mean, it's a dream. We don't know where the thoughts are coming from. We know it has to be the subconscious somewhere. And so, I don't know. I mean, the troubles that this country as a nation is having with the Democrats on the far left cost me some sleep. I mean, really, it intruded on my thoughts a lot. And that's kind of irritating. I don't usually give the wacko left that much of my attention and my time, primarily because there's just too much reality in life for that. But these days, there are enemies of America, of what this country has always been, who have infected the party and are working hard to dismantle or to destroy some of the spokes of America's wagon wheel. Ruminations, believe it or not, took me to the War of 1812. Yeah, I know. A strange night indeed. In some important ways, that war, intense and brief as it was, may have been more important for the long-term cohesion of this brand new country than the Revolution was. The colonies got together in a pretty shaky coalition of states in the mid-1700s. We'd been living on this continent in various forms and in various groups for a couple of centuries as European powers sought to expand and colonize and conquer what and where they could. The short story is well known. We got tired of living under the rule of a monarch, England's King George, and so in July of 1776, we picked a fight with George and his mighty Redcoat Army and his planet-straddling navy, and we said, we have decided to be our own little country. Put up your dukes. Heck, we didn't even know how big our country might become or might be possible. Spain controlled most of what was to the west of our little band of colonies, and France, always interested in blunting the point of England's spear, was an instrumental ally in the Revolution, and it owned vast chunks of the land that we as a new nation with no money, but lots of guts and determination, had our eyes on. We are a country because of one man mostly, a genius named George Washington, who alone could suss out our enemy's secrets and plans, and through force of will and great leadership kept a ragtag army together and the colonies knit into a unit. So that obviously oversimplifies it, but we won the fight. We started with King George in 1776, but it wasn't until 1787 and 88 that we finally worked out the details of becoming a country, when our states finally agreed that the Constitution would be our blueprint. We didn't actually have a nation until then because we had not actually agreed on the rules of the game. And when we got there, we were depleted, exhausted from years of war and fighting and dying, and we faced a wild, uncharted, and undiscovered continent that was our new home. Plus, we knew there were natives of the land that we needed either to befriend or to subjugate, but that was just a detail for the next few decades, we thought. Then, less than 25 years later, we were at war with England again, 1812. Why? Well, there are drumbeat echoes that are all too familiar today. England decided, okay, you want to be your own country, fine. You'll still have to trade with us because we're the biggest empire ever. And just because you won doesn't mean we have to make things easy for you. So the king and his crowd came up with all kinds of trade restrictions that made it hard for the new America to do international business. If the British Navy encountered American sailors at sea, they often forced them to join the British Navy. Why? Because they could. The high seas belonged to Britain and Spain and France, not us. Napoleon was running things in most of Europe, but his navy was no match for the British. Those two countries were trying to starve each other to death by that point. The bloody English were smart, too. I mean, really smart. That some Native American tribes had used against them guerrilla tactics taught them a lot. The Indians had been our allies as colonials, so England decided we need to make friends with some of them, too. They needed some Indians of their own, and they did it. And they made some treaties. They got along just fine. Why? Because, well, they had a lot of money. The baby country, the U.S., tried to resist English trade power by impassing the Embargo Act, which refused to trade with either England or France because we wanted to be independent. We wanted to be neutral. Then Congress passed a new law which ended the embargoes and declared, hey, if one of you nations decides to play nice with us, we could choose that one over the other and we could do business. Well, Napoleon was quick to decide that's a good idea. So he greenlit doing business with America, and President James Madison shut off all trade with Great Britain. That was 1811. Guess what happened next? Oh, and by the way, we had also got the idea that we needed to have more space. We needed to get bigger, the better to keep enemies away. So truly, we ought to absorb Canada into the United States. Well, it's a good thing England was in such deep-pitched war with France just then, or it really just might have come over here and kicked our little American butts for good then. I mean, we were weakened by the First War, right? Even so, while fighting Napoleon all over Europe, the British captured and burned Washington, D.C., including the White House. One after another, British forces whipped American units. You think they were still irritated over 1776 or something? We, America, lost most of the battles of that war. We didn't achieve any of our goals, but we won the ones that counted, and most notably Baltimore, Plattsburgh on Lake Champlain, and New Orleans. Morale was pretty low until General Andrew Jackson, through the dual forces of brilliance and unshakable will, defeated the British there in New Orleans and sent them packing. Lake Champlain saw the fledgling U.S. Navy defeat the mighty British fleet. That was pretty cool. Baltimore withstood the best Britain could throw at it, memorialized in the Star-Spangled Banner. And New Orleans taught the Brits, it just ain't worth trying this anymore. So America won its second war of independence, and the British at last decided to play nice. And of course, we were already buddies with France. So life was good and promising, and it set the stage for the incredible expansion and development of this nation from one ocean to the other throughout the 1800s. What else came out of that war was actually, who else? Some of the names that shaped American thinking at the time and led to our surgence as the greatest nation ever conceived, because they were the ones who drove after the training wheels of war came off. Daniel Webster, lawyer, critical thinker, political philosopher who understood why America could work. Martin Van Buren, the architect of party politics. Without that, we were going to continue to be this hodgepodge mess. John Randolph of Roanoke, Virginia, who taught the nation that power without restraint and any system that threatens liberty individually while pretending progress is poisonous. We need a lot more John Randolphs in this country today. William Crawford, as Secretary of the Treasury, he was really the first to wrestle with the expansion of credit versus careful fiscal management. He had a hard time convincing the nation that patience and prudence were more important than rapid expansion, runaway expansion that could and did prove that the good times were cyclical and often out of balance. Americans thought the good times were permanent. Crawford warned they were not, and of course he was right. One of the most important things that war did for America, however, was to underline how important were the ideals and the principles of individual liberty and common purpose codified in the Constitution. Now, these are some of the indelible lessons taught and learned by the War of 1812. The United States can and must endure as one nation, not many. We cannot be splintered into competing camps at war with each other and survive, whether we are talking Balkanism, of states or people. The miracle of American independence was fragile, too easily attacked, and it was extremely important that we recognize and revere the sacrifices it took to get there. Thomas Jefferson and James Madison and later Daniel Webster and others taught the country that ultimately law, logic, and moral reasoning had real human impacts of consequence. It was only the fealty to the Constitution as the basic framework for the nation game itself that made it possible for America to stand after the wars that allowed us to put down our guns for the moment. Public understanding of what it meant to be an American was a key to making government work. We seem to have lost a lot of that. So many governments across the span of time had come and gone. There was very much an historical sense that this too might be temporary and might pass. But the Constitution was different. It stated clearly and codified into law the new idea that the government could only exist and succeed if it stood in service to the individual, not the other way around. That was the first time. That government had to remain small and effective, therefore, rather than huge and overpowering. And most importantly, that the government never come to believe that it was in charge of the people. So you see, my sleep was restless because in having these ruminations about the War of 1812, it was sad that what was underlined for us by that war and by World Wars I and II, and to a smaller degree, Korea, Vietnam, and the Persian Gulf conflicts, that those lessons seem to have been forgotten. We fought against totalitarianism. We fought against socialism and communism in particular because they are top-down systems that put the actual power over the people in the hands of the few, the political parties that take the place of kings and queens. Socialism sounds nice, but it is a monster dressed up in a little girl's tea party dress. America has become complacent and easily distracted by technology, but mostly by tribalism and those who would pit us against ourselves. It is the prescription for destruction of every democratic, as opposed to Democrat party, every democratic effort at governance ever attempted. The Persian Empire under Cyrus allowed some autonomy among regions governed by governors or satraps. The Athenic Empire, Greece. There were some democracies in the subcontinent of India, which came as a surprise to Alexander the Great when he got there. And of course, the Empire of Rome, with its senators, publicans, and Romanos, all trying to work together under Caesars to run the empire. And all of them eventually came apart because, in one form or fashion, they ruled from the top down. Ultimately, that's what happened. Rights came from whoever was in charge and could be eliminated at their whim. That's not free. It does not sustain itself, nor does it serve the individual. So America was new. It turned everything on its head. It said individuals have rights that come just from being alive. God-given is what we call it. And it is government's job to protect those rights. First and foremost, that's government's number one job, protecting your individual rights. It is not government's job to tell the people how to live or what they can and cannot do, unless the people meet and talk about a restriction and then agree on it. That's the idea of a representative democratic republic. We elect people who watch out for us at the seats of government, make sure our personal liberties are protected, and that government itself does not get in our way. How's that going lately? We realize, as do all nations, that borders mean something, which is why they were constructed in the first place. Otherwise, chaos is guaranteed, and the cohesion necessary to have a nation becomes impossible. How's that been going lately? 1812 was messing with my peaceful night's sleep because we've come so far from the clarity of our early constitutional understanding and dedication to it that we are truly too close to losing it all. We were closer a year ago than we are today. But the constitutional principles of the individual, of you as superior to the government, are being attacked by the far left every day. It isn't really Trump derangement syndrome that's doing it. It's the collectivist cabals who are very smart people, who tend to run higher education and the news media, who are doing their level best to destroy everything and, as Obama put it, fundamentally transform the nation into a collectivist utopia. He didn't say those two words, but that's what he meant. I spent a lot of time today talking about why America's unique attempt at government has worked and how expensive it's been to create. Soon I do plan to spend some time talking about why collectivism never works, why socialism or communism or some other cute term for it is poisonous to you and you and you and me, to all of us. But that'll have to wait for another day. Enough for the moment, I think, for today's podcast. I thank you for joining in. Thank you for joining in. Thank you for listening. Thank you for thinking. Please help spread the word. You could do me a favor, send a link to an episode to a friend. Maybe they'll grab a cup of coffee. Heck, they need a cup of coffee for this one. Send them this one. That'd be great. Like, follow, subscribe, and be happy today. Make some good decisions. I'm Harley Carnes, and fly safe.